Hi, my name is Sheila Landry, and this is the fifth video of a 6-video series that I'm doing on making striking, contrasting highlights and shades using DecoArt Americana acrylics. Once again, I'm showing you France Quirion Santa's Family characters. She sells a pattern for this on her Etsy site, and I love the pattern, but it was done in Josonia paints. Josonia is a brand of paint that's a very nice high quality paint, but it has a little bit longer working time and it's used a little bit differently than DecoArt acrylics. So I decided to do a video series to show how I can make the DecoArt paints look a little bit more like the Josonia, and it's a little bit different than the regular process of just painting and float shading and highlighting. So this video is on greens, and you can see the bright contrast and this little mottled effect, and I'm going to show you how to do this. All the links for France's pattern and everything I talk about will be in the description of the video. And I'm starting with a skate. This is a surface that I sell on my site, tollpaintingdesigns.com, and I'm going to be making some patterns to go on this surface, but I thought it was a good one just for basic demonstration. And what I did is use Mistletoe green. There are 3 coats on there, 3 thin coats. The first coat you put on, you apply, and then you lightly sand it off. And what that does is it penetrates your surface, raises the grain because the wood or MDF will absorb the moisture in the acrylic paint. And then when it dries, the acrylic will kind of freeze those fibers into place, and you sand them off, and you have a nice smooth surface. So then it takes 2 coats after that, 2 thin coats, to give a nice even coverage, and it's a very nice even surface to start on. So this is, I forgot if I said this is the 5th video of the 6. So a lot of the things may be repeated a little bit, but you know, I wanted to do separate videos, so if you're working on a particular color and looking to achieve an effect, that you'll be able to find it easily. So we're going to start again by highlighting, and I think for the green I'm going to use a gold to highlight. I'm going to use golden straw instead of white. You could go to white, but I think it would be too starky. I want a warmer color on this. So golden straw is a more opaque color, and I'm going to take my Deerfoot brush, which is a short, stubby brush with medium firm bristles. They're quite packed in there. Put a little paint on, take a clean paper towel, and remove nearly all the paint. So you're working it up into the bristles, and you just want a little bit on there. And we're going to start in the highlight areas, the areas that we want highlighted, which is usually the center areas. And we're going to very gently add paint. Now you see there's no streaks. This is a very slow build. A lot of this is just relaxing time. You have to be patient a bit. You could see as I'm working, it's not going to cover in one pass. You're going to go back and forth. I'm not adding a lot of pressure, but I'm adding enough to remove the paint from the brush and get a nice highlight in the center there. Okay. That looks pretty good for now. The next thing I'm going to do is the first shading on this one. And I have two choices. One shade I like is a Hauser dark green. It's a very deep color, and it's a little bit transparent. I think it's probably a semi-transparent. The other is black green for a second highlight if you want a really deep color. So we always go for the middle and work our way either up or down. I do anyway when I paint. I usually base in the middle color, and then my highlights I step to lighter, and my shades I step to darker colors. So I'm gonna put a little on my palette, and I'm gonna use I use an angle shader. Pick up a little paint and blend it. And you can see the blend on the palette. You're going from a lot of paint to no paint. You're going to hold your brush, tip it in, and you hold it perpendicular to your palette and blend it. Now the whole brush is wet, so the paint, the color will wick from one side to the other. And that's what you want. You want like a gradual change. You could see there a little more how it's wicking. And we're going to apply this to the edges of our piece. And there's not enough paint there, that's all water. But a little more color. There we go. You want some color, and you're going to see it fades. It's dark and it fades to light. Now this was the Hauser Green Dark, which for now is plenty dark. And I'm just going to go around the piece, staying perpendicular. You're not going to turn your brush parallel to the direction you're painting, because what that's going to do is it's going to get paint on this end of the brush, and then you'll no longer have a clean edge to fade into. So what you want to do when you're float shading is turn your piece and keep your brush at about a 90-degree angle. Now when I go around corners, I'll show you, you have two choices. You could let one side dry before I go to do, say, this side. You could let this dry if you're doing a lot and skip over to another area, or once you get a little more confident in your floating, then you can, now I'm angling instead of 90 degrees, because if I stroke like this, I'm going to pull off the paint that I just put on. So I'm going to kind of tip it. I'm going to go on the tip of the brush and pull from the corner and angle it a little more towards you, but still not into that paint area. And then as you find more room, you go back to a 90-degree angle. So I'll show you again. Trying to show you like all these little tips that I use for everyday painting with these videos, so you learn something new maybe on every one. So I'm going to start here, and then as I pull the brush, I'm going to turn back to a 90-degree angle. That way I'm not disturbing the paint on this edge, on the bottom edge of the skate. And you know, as you do this more, it's going to come second nature to you. And another thing I mentioned in one of the videos, but I haven't mentioned it in a while, is I don't do it in one fell swoop. I don't do my stroke in one complete stroke around. I think people see the evenness, and I think you have to do it in one whole thing, and it's hard and it's stressful, and you run out of paint and it doesn't work. So I use smaller choppy strokes like that. And you blend it as you go. And now see, as I get to that corner, I naturally know to turn my hand that way, because if I cast it off straight, I would pull that paint off that I just put on. Okay? So something to think about with your regular floating. And this is why I chose larger pieces like this, so we can, you know, point this stuff out to you. Okay, I'm going to let that dry, because as with all floating, you have to let it dry completely before you start painting over it, so you don't take paint off that you just put on, and I'll be right back. Okay, we're back. Everything is dry, and one thing I noticed is that it kind of glazed down my dry brushing. You can see these lines, which look meh. So we're going to take care of them. I'm kind of glad that happened. I think it's the first that happened on this video, where it's so obvious anyway. And what I'm going to do is go back to my golden straw, add it onto my dry brush. Again, scrub most of it off. And we're just going to blend that back in and re-highlight. I love working with dry brushing because there's so much control. Unlike water, that's kind of wild, which is fun too. It's a challenge. But my go-to is dry brushing. There we go. I always lose bristles on these brushes. I wish they lasted forever. I looked yesterday to put a link for the Low Cornell 410 Deerfoot stipplers, and I could not find them. So if anybody knows where I can get them online, but I don't know if they're going to be going by the way of the dinosaur or what. Anyway, there's the golden straw. And now the next step, what I'm going to do is extend the green float a little bit. This is a thin float. Thicker floats are harder to do, especially on small areas. And what I like to do then is I take another Deerfoot stippler. I think I mentioned this in my other. I keep one for the highlights and one for the shades. That way I don't have to keep rinsing them out and waiting for them to dry, because one of the most important things is not to have any excess moisture or water in the brush, because what it tends to do then is streak. So, and because the bristles are so packed and dense, it takes a while to get them really dry. So I'm going to put some Hauser dark green on the palette and use my shading stippler Deerfoot brush. And then I'm going to start, need a little more for that one, because the base color is a little dark. I'm going to start down by the heel because I want that mostly dark. And what I'm doing is extending the shade. And again, instead of doing it with water, you could do it, of course, by floating a wider float, but what I'm showing is different ways to do things. We all do things different, and there's lots of ways to do things that are right, as long as they feel right for us. If we're comfortable with them, that's even better, and we want to have fun. So see how that pulls in that shading. You have a lot of control. I want the toe a little darker, so I'm going to add some more paint. And shade on that. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And the next thing I want to do is accent that highlight by glazing. And I'm going to use a little yellow green. That's a light green, and it's semi-transparent. I don't think it's fully transparent. I'm going to take a softer brush for this because I just want to add some green, and I want my highlight to be green more than gold. So I'm going to see how this works on it. It's a brighter green, and you can see on the palette it's pretty transparent. I'm adding water to it. One of my followers said that you could add, of course, glazing medium if you want to make it opaque color a little more transparent, and that's good too. You could try that. There we go. And I'm going to glaze the whole boot with it. And see how it gives that luminous effect. It's going to bring that highlight to green. It's going to tone down a little bit of the shading where it's not so dark, but it's also going to marry the colors together because you're looking through, it's as if you're looking through a piece of colored glass. By glazing, you're putting a sheer layer of color over everything. So it's going to kind of match it up. And I'm going to leave that to dry again, and then I will be back one more time. Okay, everything is dry, and that actually looks really nice. I would leave it like that for some projects that I'm doing, but now on France's, I wanted a little bit lighter on the big piece. I did not do that on the little one. I think I left it at that stage on that piece, but here I wanted the center really bright. So what I did is I took a little bit of white, I gave it one more highlight. You can go back and forth several times, as many as you want. Now I'm taking my highlight brush. It still has some of the gold in it that's dried, which is fine, because what it's going to do, you can see on the paper towel, is lighten up that golden straw color just a little. I don't want too much on there, and I'm adding a few more little bright highlights. And one thing I mentioned in the other videos is at each layer of either shading or highlighting, you're going to make a smaller area. You want each step to move, like say for the highlights, towards the center of the pieces, so that you're doing less each time. Okay, so that's just the highlighted areas. Now you could leave it like that if you want that light effect, or I'm going to probably glaze it one more time. But I also want to show one more shading on it, and I'm going to go down to another deeper color of green, which is black green. You could also, as I did in the other video, add a little bit of black to the Hauser dark green. Just because they're acrylics doesn't mean you can't mix them on the palette. And, you know, I know everybody's afraid to mix, that they're not going to get the exact colors or blah, 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 but you don't have to. You really don't. You can make any range of shades with, you know, one or two colors. Now see, I'm adding that extra layer of green. This is black green. And what it's doing is it's bringing out the shades that got glazed over. And they will get glazed again. I'm going to glaze this again in the center at least. And it's really going to give you a deep contrast. I mean, that's why I wanted to do this series, was to show how to achieve such striking contrasts, not just basic shadow and highlight. Okay, so my black green is on there, and I have to let it dry one more time because I float shaded. If I do anything now, I'll pull it off, so I'll be right back again. Okay, and dry, and once again I'm using the darker shading stippler, and I'm gonna just, it looks a little bit lined to me, so I'm just gonna soften that last shade by putting on a little bit of black green, as we did before with the other colors. Are you guys seeing a pattern here? I mean, everything's done pretty much the same process. And the last thing I will do for this stage of this is do another wash with the yellow green. And it'll give her that final luminous look. And see, you don't want it to catch there. You want to add just some plain water. And remember, it'll dry a little lighter. When it's dark, it's a little, or when it's wet, it's a little darker. Be sure to go over those white places. It gives it an almost glowing effect. And if you want it a little lighter, in between glazings, allow it to dry completely. Okay, I'll do one more dry, and then I'm going to show an extra little thing that somebody asked about on this. So, hang in there. One more cutaway. Okay, we could call this done, but somebody had asked me how I did this little area here, if I sponged that in. And I didn't, because the area is so small, it would be sloppy to sponge it. So what I did is I just used a little dome blender. You can use probably any brush you want. And I used a little bit of water and some yellow light. You could also use a green, yellow green, or anything, you know, depending on what the color. And I'm just taking a little bit of watered down color now. These are transparent colors. And I'm just kind of walking the brush around the piece like that. And you don't want it even. But see, you have a lot more control than a sponge right here. This is going to dry up. It might take a couple layers. It's going to dry up much more transparent. You're not going to see a lot of color. And which layers is good. You just don't want to cover your layers completely of what you did. And then I took Sapphire blue, which is not really transparent. It's more opaque. So I had to be careful with that. And I added that in little splotches here and there. These are little watery splotches. And they make it look like a marbled effect. So that's it. It's easy. And see how it's very easy to, if you make a mistake, you can just remove it if you're quick enough. Okay? So, on to video 6, which will be grays, which are going to be easy and fast too. But we'll see you. Thanks for watching.